Lindy and Jason. Jason, both from the Canadian Medical Association, from one of their companies, which is called Joule, and we'll tap into that in a minute. But I also know that Jason wears multiple hats, and one of those is one of the co-founders of Hacking Health from Canada. And, accelerators, incubators, hackathons. How in the world will people around us understand that this is an ecosystem that is building up, and what should everyone's role be in that? Could you elaborate a bit on that?
Well, I think these accelerators, the hackathons.
Is the mic on? Yeah, I think now it is.
So, yeah, the hackathon, the accelerator, these are tools for us to create channels in which ideas can come out. Patients talk about how frustrated they are with the way that we deliver care, but we as providers are frustrated as well. When your daughter comes to see me as a physician and I don't have her whole story, no. I can't be the best doctor that I want to be. And so we are in these ecosystems that are typically oceans of no, where
oceans of no?
No, we still have to use our fax machine. No, we still have to use our pagers. And we
Here's another good quote.
That's the second quote of the day. Yeah. We're aiming for 5, by the way.
And so, we're in these tsunamis of no, and we need to create islands of yes, where the ideas that we have, the experience that we have, both from a provider's point of view and a patient's point of view, can come out. And Sean talks about co-creating or bottom-up innovation. That can't happen unless we have these islands of yes that allow those innovations to come forward.
Yeah.
So.
And then you build the bridges between the islands.
Exactly. Exactly. So, what is the hackathon? What is an accelerator? It's a tool for us to be able to create channels for us to be able to get those ideas out from the people who are actually experiencing them.
And you are very much thriving for a global movement of hackathons, again, as a tool. What are the challenges that you face in this? Is it on the organizational level to get these things up and running, or is it more on the professional level, or are you aiming more on the individuals that together will create something like a community?
So it's interesting, when we go to a hospital and we say, we want to take a part of your hospital for the weekend, and we want your staff to come, give up their own personal time to work with us, they're like, I don't know if the doctors are going to show up. I don't know if the nurses are going to show up. But we've done 50 of these hackathons, and not at a single one have we had enough space for nurses, patients, doctors to come on their own time and pitch their ideas. So I think there's a huge well of frustration with the system, but also energy to try and change it.
Yeah.
So for us, the challenge is to be able to get those tools to as many people as possible, and then to connect those, as you said. We have these islands of yes, to connect those islands of yes, and then it's what you're talking about with the accelerator next, is that the hackathon is about getting an idea together, but it's a tool to create a team and a culture of yes. And then once that culture of yes is created, can we then iterate on top of that?
Yeah.
So, a hackathon is a tool for me.
I see the same. When I look at the work that Alberto is doing, it's really an enabler for co-create, for joint view of how can we make this better. And as you say, there's a lot of energy around making things better for patients. So I think if we can tap into that at scale, I think it will change the world.
Which is also one of the challenges that you could face, for instance, at the Canadian Medical Association, Lindy, where from a professional standpoint of view, you try to not only encourage, but also support and leverage the way that physicians can innovate. Could you share a bit about the newly created company Joule for that?
It is interesting. The Canadian Medical Association is a 150-year organization.
Older than us.
And when you said 120, when I said 125, I recognize that. But what they realized, and they've been innovative through all those 150 years, like Philips has been innovative through their time, but they recognized that they needed a focus. They needed a focus to provide on quality of care and to provide game-changing products to really disrupt and drive change within the system. And so we are a startup, Joule. Joule, it means a unit of energy. It's used by cardiologists, by the way. And we are a startup organization. We use lean thinking in terms of developing our products and services. And we've set up an innovation council of young entrepreneurs that have ridden that roller coaster of startups, but also succeeded. And Dr. Jishan Chowdhury here has been one of them, and he sits on the council. And as well, we developed a grant program. And what we're really, to seed physicians' ideas, there was a young woman physician, we've only launched a month ago, by the way, but a young woman physician came up to me and she said, I was in the hospital, I have a great idea, I went to my department head and said, I think this is what we need to do, and they said, no. And she said, but why not? And the director said, focus on medicine. And she said, I am focused on medicine. This is what we need to do. And the Canadian Medical Association has a lot of trust amongst its community. And so we want to start a movement for physician-led innovation. And you know, one of the things that's really important with physicians, we train them to be evidence-based, in control. Certainly if you go into surgery, you want them in control to know what they're going to do. But now we're saying innovate. And innovate is the other part, and we're talking about minimal viable product. They're used to a fully baked product, a very excellent product. Now, you're going to test it out. What do you mean I'm going to test it out? It doesn't work or does it not? And so that whole startup culture, so we're really having to change that conversation. And I will arguably say we need to change how we educate physicians and using both parts. And the minimal viable product, I believe, is the way of the future. And it's exciting, and we're going to have some resistance and some change. But we're really focusing on the target audience of the 30 to 45 group, because there's an energy there, there's an enthusiasm. The hackathons are really, really engaging, and what Jishan has set up as one of the founders is really fascinating, because they just got engaged. We did a 2-hour hackathon, and we called it our Big Ideas, and it was amazing. They did a whole business canvas in 2 hours and came up with the solution and had to present back to us. So I think there's a willingness to change from physicians. I think they want to change, but they need a safe place. And they need an organization such as ours to say, this is good, this is what we need to do.
Great initiative. I want to pick up on the evidence base. Of course, that's what gave us a big jump in the outcomes in medicine. But now we're at a completely different world, because you know we're working with MIT. We have 2 million longitudinal patient records, and we start seeing things that we haven't seen before. So out of the data, we see patterns, we see probabilities, and one of the interesting ones. I'm not a physician, but you know, if you have some neurological problem, sometimes you need to measure the pressure between the skull and the brain, and you have to drill a hole. Actually, what they found in the data, that through a combination of medical records and vital signs, you can actually get a proxy of that pressure, and it's very, very accurate. So, you know, they can predict with 99% plus accuracy what the pressure is. Even they don't drill a hole in your skull. They just don't know why. So it's very interesting, and it's replicable. So every time they can replicate it, they don't have the medical theory behind it. And we're going to see more and more and more of that, where you see patterns, you can replicate it. It will give the same outcomes, but we just don't have the full, you know, medical theory behind us. So I think we're opening up a whole new world where innovation can come around the data and new practices of medicine.
I think it's a journey where we have to blend the two together, right? It is evidence-based, and physicians do want to base their practice. For example, you have a lot of data, and I think data is a driver for physician making some decisions. But can you innovate through data? And I don't think I think it's showing physicians that way, and I think we can do it.
And I mean, we all want the best doctor, right? Nobody wants an average physician. I want to go to the best doctor. I want her to know, I want her to be practicing not what she learned 5 years ago in medical school, but what's best today, and then thinking about the future. So it's in patients' best interest that we cultivate innovation and leadership amongst physicians, and doing things like you're saying in terms of accessing the data, experimenting with it, looking for patterns, and then applying that to our future practice, not doing what we've done in the past. So it's critical that we cultivate physicians as leaders and as innovators, and getting us to think about doing things in new ways.
And then I have a question to you, Lucia. I know you're the moderator, but
No, I got an easy
no,
job on this
but
one. That's great.
you're part of Radboud, it's a university medical center. You know, what you're saying means a different way of educating doctors, and I know you're passionate about it. So.
Yeah, we know the challenge. So we also said if you always will be waiting for the next bus, it will create a new time schedule over and over again. So last September we launched a whole new curriculum for physicians, where e-health, innovating together with patients, social media, and BYOP is part of that. And as opposed to BYOD, like bring your own device, it's indeed bring your own patient. So our colleagues came up with the idea, let's ask our students, our new freshmen, and girls of course, imagine that you could adopt someone in your family or in your neighborhood or some of your friends that suffers from whatever condition. And you could go with them throughout the journey within healthcare. So if they go to the GP, you'll join it. If they go to the pharmacist, you'll join it. And that's part of your education, so you will be accredited for that. The hope of my colleagues was that about, like, let's say 50, maybe even 55 students from out of the 450 would adhere to that. Turns out it's 380. From day one, as opposed to in the 3rd grade, joining patients in their journey, and I would love to talk about your drive in a second, throughout healthcare and learn tons of stuff that they would bring into our own hackathons together with Hacking Health to find out solutions and the answers that our Minister of Secretary of State was looking for. Please share your story about the drive that you're going every now and then.
So I always say I'm on a journey because I know with everybody the expectations are high, and it's about, I can't go directly to point A to point B. And in building a movement and building a physician-led innovation and working with physicians, you have to zig and zag to get to the end, and you have to be ready to say, oh, I took the wrong turn, I failed fast, I need to come back. We're not used to failing. I don't think any of us as adults want to say, I failed. I'm getting much better at it, for sure. And I think it's a journey to your destination. And I think we're on a really important journey. And I think the only thing is the car is really speeding up when I see the innovations that are taking place and the transformation. And I believe it's a global movement. Health is not, in one country or in our country in one province. It's a global movement. And I think what Radboud is doing and what your country is doing is fantastic, because you're building a network of possibilities. And in our organization, we say connect to the power of possibilities. And I think that's the journey we're on, and it's the journey of building those relationships and really building those partnerships in terms of what we're doing.
Alberto, look into the things that Jason shared with us, also kind of even offering a community that is being created worldwide of physicians, nurses, people within IT, policymakers, and we even had administrators also at the table.
Yes.
Is this something like a collaboration that could come up?
It all sounds
like
very
Philips
good
is
to me.
working globally, Hacking Health is working globally.
Yes, yes. I think that absolutely. I think one of the challenges that we have as an organization is how to navigate across all of the things that are happening right now. We try to be as selective as we can, try to put our efforts in where we believe we could have the best impact, and that in itself, navigating through all of those activities and through all of those startup movements that are happening is a challenge, and we try to do the best we can. But absolutely, this is exactly what we're looking for. If we can have a group of physicians, multidisciplinary, that we can work together to create new innovation, that's exactly what we're after. And I do recognize some of the challenges that you were mentioning about, thinking about MVPs and minimal viable propositions to a community of practitioners that have been furthest away from the notion of something minimum viable is really a challenge. But if you think of it as a tool to prioritize, to really focus on what's really necessary and try to build it up as you learn more things, I think it really requires a different mindset and culture, and I think it's part of the transformation journey that all of us in this industry are going through, and that applies also to Philips.
I don't know if you've listened to Derek Sivers' TED Talk on setting up a movement, but one of the things he does say if you see a lone nut doing something good, stand up and applaud. And I think sometimes we don't do that. Someone's out there and we're waiting, sort of like your penguin video that you showed. Someone's out there doing a great thing and we're all waiting to see everybody to run and endorse, versus us just walking with you.
Yeah.
And it's taking those steps and bringing each group on along at the same time. I think is really important.
Yeah.
So you touched on the word startups. So the theme of our conference is innovation, patients included, and startups. Back to you, Jeroen. What can Philips do to harness not only the power and also the brain thrust that's is pumping up actually in all kinds of places? And over the last months, I had something like a feeling that somebody switched on the light. All of a sudden, in all places, things start to happen. You run into great people. You see all kinds of activities going on. What is is there a strategy for Philips working with startups, and is that changing? Because as you know, Nelly Kroes is one.
There definitely is, and we do it on different levels. So, we talked this morning about our Health Suite Labs, where we bring in the key ecosystem players and try to get them on the same journey. Instead of everybody going different directions. Okay, we don't know exactly how the road is going, but let's get on the road together. Couple of levels down, so we're setting up this open health infrastructure, which, in healthcare, of course, privacy, security, but also interoperability of data, having the platforms to do the analytics on in a secure environment, very high scale. That's stuff we've been working on with some of our big partners, like Amazon Web Services. So we basically said, we're creating a core infrastructure, so it's easier for people to innovate on that. Because if you're a 25-person company and you need 20 of these people building infrastructure, you don't have enough bandwidth to do the really innovative stuff. That's one thing. But I think the real thing is all this innovation needs to find its place in the point of care. So how can it really help a patient? How can it help a physician be a better physician? How can it have a care team be better coordinated in the care of a patient? So if we can help bring some of these innovations actually to the point of care, then I think we're making a real impact. And can we stimulate it? So earlier this week I was in Israel, and in Israel we sent up, together with Teva Pharma, we set up a venture fund. And I met with some of the companies that we invested in, and they love us, not just because we're giving them some money. That's okay, they can get money. I think the real thing is we help them actually not to be a startup, or like our minister said, a scale up, because that's the harder part. So how can we help them find a market for this, give them an environment in which, in a secure, evidence-based, or at least complying with regulatory environment, a place to monetize their innovation. And that's where we want to head as Philips. So we want to create more of these ventures, and you're aware we also set up a venture fund in Singapore to innovate with smaller companies, and you will find us doing that in more and more places, and then tapping into the ecosystem, but also offering the ecosystem a platform to monetize their innovation.
Because we can't wait.
Yeah.
It's like Martin said. Like, there's all these startups, and we need e-health now, not in 5 years. And I think what Philips can do is work with these smaller companies and go from just concepts to actually point of care and scale. And that's the power of those partnerships.
Yeah, and then there's one more thing I want to mention there, because, and you all know it, there's a lot of great innovation that ends up becoming a point solution.
Yeah.
And ultimately, you can do a great app, let's say, for diabetes, but guess what? Type 2 diabetics have heart failure. Many of them have 3 or 4 other chronic diseases. So it has to come back to the person, and how we can give you as a person the tools, and how can we drop in those innovations. Because if we start creating new innovative stovepipes, it's not going to get us where we need to be.
If it was just an app, we'd have solved the problem already.
Yeah.
So it's more than that. So it's about how we can think of, like, if just around diabetes, like how do we connect it to the comorbidities, but the system of delivery as well, and then the social determinants of health. And a startup can look at pieces of that, but needs to work with larger
so the
partners
system
to do that.
innovation, I think, is the harder part, and that's where we all need to work together.
I would like to discriminate also what innovation is, and then wrapping up a bit, because to me, I greatly adhere to what Peter Thiel calls innovation in his book From Zero to One, which is from nothing stepping into something, and then when you go from 1 to 100, that's implementation. And in a lot of companies, including our own, for years we kind of molded it into one piece and said, that's the group that runs these kind of things. And like Philips is clearly stretching that out. That's also the thing that we try to do, because they're equally important, but it's a real different cup of tea in that perspective.
And it's different people, too.
Completely.
The people who start versus the people who scale are very different. And we talk about the hackathon. The hackathon is supposed to be like hack marathon, but it's really just a sprint that starts things off, and there's a marathon that goes through. And it's the progression across those different stages where we need to work together to make it happen.
And I think that's really why in Jewel we want to provide a support mechanism. So you have a great idea, you do this sprint, and some of our Innovation Council members are willing to mentor other entrepreneurs, so to make sure that they don't repeat the same mistakes or challenges or go through the same challenges. And I think there's a lot of benefit to having that mentorship from one entrepreneur to another.
Just because you work in a hospital doesn't mean you know how to sell to a hospital. In fact, they're very different things. So the experience that we have here.
Trust me, I've been there.
Yeah.
My point here is that yes, we need to scale up, and there's more and more debate on scaling up. But the other thing is that without starting up and setting up the inventions, there's nothing to scale up.
Exactly.
And we have to prevent that we would go into the alley, that we say it's either or. It's equally important, and that's great to see how these kind of things go. Maybe a last round of last remarks before we wrap up. Jeroen, what's your biggest challenge for, let's say, the next 6 months?
I think the biggest challenge for the next 6 months and the next 6 years is really what you start talking about, connecting those islands and really start addressing the levers of health. So the next 6 months, I want to do another step in this. Can we get some of the companies work together, which we really want to prove at eHealth, hey, we can bring different players together and we can create something new that really improves the care.
Thank you. Alberto.
I think my next challenge, I think it's probably to get better at engaging with entrepreneurs. I think this is something that we are also in our learning journey as well. I think we need to find ways of engaging productively with the right startups. I think probably you can think the digital accelerator as being the closest you can get to a startup within Philips. So we tend to talk the same language, tend to have the same mentality, but trying to come up from an idea jointly to something that you can actually scale, which is the hardest thing, but you cannot scale. I mean, you should be scaling something that you know can work. You need to validate it, and that early front-end process is key and fundamental. Then once you have the right questions or answers to the questions, then certainly scaling should be something that for a company like Philips should be pretty straightforward. It's just the front-end innovation part that we need to get it right in partnership with startups and physicians.
Jason.
I would say, it goes back to your story about focus on the medicine, is that we need to change the definition of what medicine means, that it is taking care of your patients, it is running a good department and a good hospital, but it's also thinking about the system and having a responsibility as a provider and as a physician to think about the system as well, and that if I'm working on the system, I'm also practicing medicine.
I have some big challenges. Shifting the culture is probably one. And changing to that startup mentality. And even we're moving into a new space, and it's less space. No one will have a fixed desk. They'll go to whatever spot. But it's really turning things on its head. And that's a big challenge in terms of doing that and embedding it in the physician culture across the country so that we really do see new change. By 2020, our physicians will be Gen Y and millennials, and
A tough group to deal with.
It is a tough group to deal with. But you know what? It's a great group to deal with because I think it's stretching our mind, and it's stretching us to be where we need to be. And by 2020, that's 4 short years. So I'm looking for some big adventures in the next 4 years.
Well, thank you again. So that's it. It's about like 30 hours of content in terms of patients included innovation, together with startups. Over 40 speakers, not only in Nijmegen, but in all the cities all over the world have joined us in this live stream to share their vision, to share their action list again as well, and also to try to tickle our minds and to encourage each and everyone to get up tomorrow morning at 9:30, start working on the ideas. Philips, thank you for hosting us, being as gentle to help us again as a real partner in this, 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 a real partner in